Coming up on 2020 on ID.
Can you tell if your dad is breathing?
There's blood pouring out of his head.
A man with a mask.
It hits you as something horrific.
A story that doesn't add up.
And I remember we were just, what?
And a brother and sister accusing each other.
Who was the masked intruder that came into your house at 4 a.m.?
It was Nathan.
I didn't do it. My sister blames me for everything, and she always has.
A picture emerges of a family in turmoil.
It got to the point where I thought she was going to kill me.
And two teenagers bent on revenge.
I wanted him to honestly feel like, take me seriously for sure.
You have to be a little empty inside to take the person who loved you so much.
Who really pulled the trigger? And why?
Timothy McNeil did not deserve to end up like that.
Siblings driven to kill. Welcome to 2020 on ID. I'm John Quinones. By all appearances, lawyer Tim McNeil was not the kind of father, brother, husband, and friend anyone would have reason to kill. He was hardworking, good-natured. He seemed to care deeply for his family. So when Tim was murdered in his own home, no one immediately suspected anyone close to him. But there was one key witness, his 17-year-old stepdaughter. And as detectives dug deeper, they began to uncover the roots of a primal tragedy long in the making. As Mary Fulginiti first reported in 2009, those roots sometimes grow where they're least expected.
There's a house on a quiet street in the hills of San Diego. With its distant ocean views and scenic sunsets, it looks like a typical house. But inside, a terrible secret. The pool of blood has been cleaned up, the 4 bullet holes filled in. The house is silent now, but it wasn't then.
Can you tell if your dad is breathing?
He shot him twice in the head.
Okay. Do you know if he shot him in the head or in the stomach or...
He shot him in the head at least once, I know, because there's blood pouring out of his head.
Okay.
It was a beautiful day when a man dressed in black burst into the house of well-to-do lawyer Timothy McNeil and his 17-year-old stepdaughter, Bray.
He asked for the combination to the safe.
Okay, so he asked for the combination to the safe. What'd your dad do?
He refused, and then he shot him.
Okay.
Detectives J.C. Smith and Brett Burkett got the call from dispatch.
They told us it was a home invasion robbery and that the victim had been tied up and that there was a surviving victim.
So as you're driving to the crime scene, any thoughts going through your head?
And we talked about how brazen it would be for someone to do this in the middle of the afternoon and who might do such a terrible thing. And
That doesn't typically happen, I would
expect.
It's
It's unusual, I mean, especially since Tim McNeil didn't live a high-risk lifestyle. He's not your typical homicide victim. We were hoping that the patrol guys were on the trail of the masked gunman that ran out the back door.
So this is the door you came through?
Yeah, this is the door that we came through. Mr. McNeil's body was laying on the floor here with his head towards the pool table and his feet towards the door. And what I saw first was the large amount of blood. It just, it hits you as something horrific.
And now the news is starting to spread.
Neighbors are shocked to hear the
TV was on, so I walked into the family room and I looked up and I saw Tim's house with all this yellow tape and everything. And
Rick and Bonnie are Tim's brother and sister-in-law.
When you got there, Rick, what went through your mind and your heart?
God no, you know.
I just kept screaming, "Where's Bray? Where's Bray? Where's Bray? Is Bray okay?"
Was anybody else in the house at the time the officers first entered?
When the first officers arrived, Bray was in the corner.
Was she crying?
She was upset, and her hands were bound behind her back.
Hands zip-tied behind her, Bray tells police she managed to dial 911 with her tongue.
It was horrible to hear the news of my father, and I just fell apart.
For Bray's stepsister, Erin, the shock of their father's death almost equaled by her concern for Bray.
I was livid that this poor girl had witnessed one of the most heinous things happen to her father. And I just was like, how is she going to come back from this? How is she going to do this?
Outside on the patio, police find a .357 Magnum revolver.
And where was the gun located?
running the top staircase right here.
In tracing the killer's getaway route, police find a black shirt thrown high in this tree and 2 eyewitnesses who caught a glimpse of the murderer running up this path before getting into a truck and taking off. Back at the police station, a shocked Bray gives police more details.
First thing I see is my dad standing sideways and the person all in black.
A black ski mask and sunglasses obscured his face. Strangely, his voice was obscured in an odd way.
He disguised his voice as a cartoon character. It was a high-pitched, kind of squeaky.
It seemed at first like a robbery gone bad, but detectives wonder, why would a robber disguise his voice?
That's when we were like, oh. Because you know, a home invasion robber, they want to sound like the boogeyman. They want to sound like Daffy Duck, you know?
Unless this was someone Tim knew.
Is there a client that...
disgruntled client.
That was upset with him.
But as they find out more about Timothy McNeil, they discover a man apparently without enemies.
He's the coolest guy. I mean, he got along with everyone he met. He would start conversations with strangers. He liked all the best things in life. He loved good food. He loved, you know, hanging out with friends. And he was the best storyteller. He was really just a child at heart.
Since his second wife, Doreen, died, Tim lived quietly here with Doreen's daughter, Bray. Her son, Nathan, was away at college in Arizona.
Do you have any idea at that point who would want Tim McNeil dead?
No.
None. Or a motive or a reason or anything.
But then Bray, while being questioned by the police, suddenly blurts out a name.
I heard my dad ask him, "Why are you doing this, Nathan?" And that's all I know. He didn't say that's not my name or that's not who I am, or he didn't deny it.
Nathan? Could the killer be her own brother?
Tell us about the slip Bray made.
She said this name, Nathan. And she goes, but she said, it's not my brother. My brother's named Nathan, but it's not him. And I remember we were just, what?
It seemed impossible. Nathan, a clean-cut honors student, his life an open book on YouTube.
Hello there, YouTube people. My name is Nathan Gann.
Interested in girls, a little goofy, but full of promise. And if Nathan killed their stepfather, why would Bray shield him? She adored her stepdad, Tim.
Dad was daddy. And, I mean, he raised her. I mean, that was Dad.
But police are beginning to think Bray is holding back important information.
Maybe you call it our police sixth sense.
Either she was holding up very well for what she had just seen,
right,
or there's a lot more to her story.
But why would Bray or Nathan want Tim dead? When they were 4 and 6, Tim married their mother, schoolteacher Doreen Hansen, and made them part of his family.
How did Tim treat Bray and Nathaniel?
Oh, well, I mean, they were his kids. He treated them just like he treated me.
But behind all this, a terrible secret. A family in turmoil. Their mother, Doreen, was suicidally depressed and had been abusing Nathan and Bray from an early age.
Did you ever hear her demean Bray, or berate Bray, or put her down, or make her feel worthless?
In my opinion, yes. Yes.
Did you ever see her say, "I love you"?
Oh, no. No.
Did you ever see her put her arm around Bray to comfort her, to console her?
No.
For Nathan, it was much worse.
What did Nathaniel go through growing up?
She was physically violent with him, hitting him, hit him with sticks, ridicule him. He would be in the bathroom, bring his sister in and point out his penis and ridicule him about it in front of his sister. And then the names, I mean...
and what were some of the names?
She called him, you know, on a regular basis.
When you ask Nathan and Bray about it, even now you hear that odd, detached tone abused children often resort to.
She threw things at me.
Like what kind of things?
Like kitchen appliances and knives.
She would throw knives at you?
Mm-hmm.
Like she was going to kill you?
Yeah. Well, she had threatened to kill me several times. She had told me that she was going to kill me and bury me in Mexico.
How old were you at the time?
Like 8, 9.
She would just say, you know, what would you do if I, you know, drove off the Coronado Bridge? What would you do if, you know, I just burnt the house down? And this is when I'm, you know, 10, 7.
Why was she saying all these things to you? I mean, was she sick?
There was something that was not all the way right with my mother.
In a childhood of chaos, one oasis of sanity.
Was there anyone in the house you felt you could trust?
Tim.
Did Tim just stand there and watch it happen, or did he ever defend you or try to defend you?
You know, he'd step in drink, that's enough.
It was Tim who arranged for 12-year-old Nathan to go live with his grandmother in Arizona to escape the abuse at home. His name was rarely mentioned after that.
It was really weird because I was still a kid, and it was never spoken about to me. He was just gone.
Away from his mother, Nathan blossomed and became an honors student. But Doreen's condition was getting worse, and she was taking it out on her daughter.
How bad did it ultimately get?
It got to the point where I had to move to Tucson because I thought she was going to kill me.
16-year-old Bray was living with her brother, now a college student in Arizona, when a tragedy took place.
My mom called and threatened suicide.
It wasn't the first time, and Nathan was fed up.
And she said that she was going to die. She was like, I need to talk to Bray.
And, I guess I was asleep.
I said, well, when she wakes up, I'll have her call you.
So you didn't take her seriously?
No. And she goes, fine, and click, hangs up. I didn't know that she had already taken a whole handful of pills.
Their stepfather, Tim, found her dead the next morning.
I guess she just wanted to say goodbye.
Were you crying? Were you upset? Or were you relieved that this woman who was a monster to you is now gone?
I was bawling. I couldn't stop crying for days.
Yet you still loved her?
I have to.
You don't have to love anybody.
I believe that you have to love everyone.
For two kids who had spent their lives trying to earn their mother's love, it was a devastating loss. And now, a year later, their stepfather dead as well, and both are under suspicion for his murder. The question everyone is asking is why? Why would a caring stepfather end up dead? 400 miles away in Arizona, police put that question to Nathan. He says he wasn't even there.
I don't know anything, though. I need a lawyer. This is too powerful. This is just... I'm trying to tell you guys I wasn't involved. Good luck to you.
Police also question Bray, who raises their suspicions.
Were you surprised the killer left her alive?
To leave a witness to that, it seemed unusual.
Unusual things start to add up. Less than 10 hours after the murder, Bray sees a police artist sketch of a man witnesses saw running away from the murder house.
And they're on the internet looking at the sketch, and Bray said she never saw the face of the killer, but when the sketch came out, she said, no, his jaw was more square-like.
The police read Bray her rights, turn on a video camera, and then the statement no one saw coming.
I'm usually not like this. I don't know if I need some treatment or what.
You think she could be charged with anything?
It did kind of start the whole thing, even if it was, I don't know, lapse of judgment or whatever. And I mentioned to one of my friends, Nikki, that, like, I wished I could, but that was about it.
You wish you could what?
That I wished I could, like, kill my dad or whatever.
Coming up, both Bray and Nathan stand trial for Tim McNeil's murder.
What the evidence shows is that a conspiracy to kill Timothy McNeil existed between Bray Hansen and her brother.
And a sister turns on her brother.
He said this is going to happen whether or not you want it. And if you're smart, you'll go along with it or you'll end up just like him.
Who really killed Tim McNeil? Stay with us. San Diego attorney Tim McNeil has been shot to death in his own house, and his stepchildren, Bray and Nathan, are prime suspects. But which of them is the cold-blooded murderer, or are they both guilty? As Mary Fulginiti reports, a brother and sister, once close, are about to find themselves at odds with each other.
They're both there. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter who pulled the trigger.
It was Nathan.
I didn't do it.
I think it's the only time I've ever really had my heart broken.
Almost 2 years after the murder of Tim McNeil, the trial that will decide who killed him is about to begin.
All rise.
A brother and sister, both charged with first-degree murder. She says he did it.
Who was the masked intruder that came into your house at 4 a.m.?
It was Nathan.
He says she must have done it because he wasn't even there.
Tell me then, if you didn't kill your dad, what did you do that day? Where were you that day?
I'm not allowed to talk about that day.
But who's telling the truth? There are two brilliant lawyers for the defense, and the knives are out.
She tried everything she could to stop her brother, Nathan Gann, from killing their father, Timothy McNeil.
So even if you have to bury the brother, if it saves the client, that's what you sometimes have to do.
Absolutely. She confided in friends that she wanted to have her stepfather killed or wanted him dead.
You alluded that the killer could be Bray.
If that's what the evidence shows, then that's what I'll argue, without second thought.
They're up against veteran prosecutor George Bennett, who says the defendants are both guilty.
What the evidence shows, ladies and gentlemen, in this case, is that a conspiracy to kill Timothy McNeil existed between Bray Hansen and her brother.
The prosecution's trump card, Bray's confession to the cops.
It did kind of start the whole thing, even if it was, let him know, lapse of judgment or whatever.
She admits to making the initial phone call to her brother, but says it was really Nathan who made it happen. They hear her entire confession, and it is damning.
I still can't believe I did this. It's not like me.
Jurors listen spellbound as she describes her brother's instructions. She puts a spare key, a gun that once belonged to her mother, and money into a box on the back patio where he can find it.
You made a key.
I did.
You took cash out of your account.
I did.
And you got the gun.
I did.
And you put all those items in a box and you left them on the back doorstep for the killer to get.
Yes, I did.
She says the money was originally to pay for a hitman. But then on July 19th at 4 a.m., she says she's awakened by Nathan, dressed all in black.
He came in at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And he was like, here, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I thought this was over. I don't want to do this.
Did he have a gun pointed at you?
Yes, he did.
And what did he say to you?
He said, this is going to happen whether or not you want it. And if you're smart, you'll go along with it or you'll end up just like him.
The confession is riveting, but not all the jurors in the courtroom get to hear it. For if this is a case of two sibling suspects, it is also an example of a rare legal phenomenon, a single trial with two separate juries. Because some evidence is not admissible for both defendants, Bray and Nathan each get their own jury.
You are the blue jury. You will start out here, over where these folks are sitting right now. That's where the red jury will sit.
One trial, two juries, two alternate versions of the truth, and two lawyers who are working all the angles.
Hypothetically speaking, two different juries, you could have two different verdicts.
Yes, you could.
You could end up walking out with one client being acquitted and the other client being found guilty of, a murder.
If you two start pointing the finger, it could actually work to both of your benefits, because each of them could get off.
You know, that's certainly their benefit. That's helpful to Bray and to Nathaniel. They both get to go home.
That's a prospect too hard to bear for stepsister Erin.
You have to be a little empty inside and not know truly what love brings to your life to take the person who loved you so much from your life.
But why would either kill their stepfather? In her confession, Bray paints a picture of a younger sister being controlled by her older brother.
That's when he said, we're going to do this and you're going to help or else.
Why didn't you call the police then?
He's my brother.
A brother hell-bent on revenge for childhood slights. Motivations begin to emerge.
Did you ever say why he was doing it?
He eventually started saying something about how Tim had not been a good enough father to him. He hadn't been a good enough father to me. They had a lot of issues. And he knew I didn't want to go through with it. But I did anyway, since it's my fault.
On the tape, she seems to accept partial responsibility. But at times she appears curiously unemotional, even cavalier.
How don't you guys catch us?
That's what we do for a living.
Don't look any better way.
But were Bray and her brother in cahoots? Or was Bray trying to set up Nathan to take the fall?
We've talked to some really bad people in our career.
She's in the top two. of the most callous.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Perhaps equally damning, a detective testifies about driving Bray to the station for questioning only minutes after the murder.
And I noticed movement coming from where Bray Hansen was sitting. When I turned to look at her, she was like dancing in her seat, and she made the comment that she liked the song that was on the radio.
What was the song on the radio?
Big Girls Don't Cry.
Do you cry?
I try not to.
Why?
Because I don't like crying. It makes me feel weak.
And the police officers say when they took you away from the crime scene that you were dancing in the car. Did it bother you?
We still talk about it.
It absolutely bothered us.
But the big question is why? When we come back, for the first time, what no jury got to hear.
Tim comes home, I tie him up.
Why Bray wanted the man she adored and called her daddy to die.
I wanted him to hurt like he had hurt me.
When we come back.
Bray Hansen and her brother Nathan Gann are on trial for the murder of their stepfather, Tim McNeil. The prosecution's case rests largely on Bray's chilling confession, but with separate juries, will that be enough to convict both siblings? Once again, Mary Fulginiti.
Her jury hears the videotape confession.
He was like, okay, I'm gonna have to shoot him.
His jury does not.
What is the
Instead, what Nathan Gann's jury hears is a case based almost solely on circumstantial evidence about the day his stepfather was murdered.
Police found a piece of clothing in a tree thrown off to the side.
Up in the tree, there was a bundle of clothing. There was a black shirt and a black mask.
The shirt police found thrown away on the killer's escape path had nothing to tie it to Nathan. But the mask found inside the shirt comes back as a match for Nathan's DNA.
Mr. Gann matches the DNA that I obtained.
But Nathan's lawyer proves the first time they tested the mask, it was not a match. Could the sample have been contaminated? Round one, a draw.
Did you make an identification of this person you saw?
A witness puts Nathan at the scene.
That gentleman right there.
More or less.
But I can't say I'm absolutely 100% positive.
Another witness says the assailant got into a truck on this road.
One of the neighbors actually saw him get inside the truck.
It matched the description of Nathan's truck almost perfectly.
If he doesn't see the paint, then it's not Mr. Gann's truck.
Do you solemnly state under penalty?
Most damning, perhaps, a jailhouse informant says Nathan confessed and seemed to know details only the killer would know.
He said when he was running up the stairs, he threw him over the side and they got caught in the tree.
But Nathan's lawyer paints the informant as a liar.
Is this the kind of guy you trust when he tells you a story? Is this the kind of guy you believe?
For the juries, perhaps the most intriguing question is why? Why would Bray or Nathan have killed their stepfather? Even the prosecutor doesn't seem to know.
Nobody can really explain this case. You think of motive and you think of a reason, and there isn't one.
But as the trial proceeds, possible motives emerge. For Bray, who had gotten used to having Tim all to herself, suddenly a rude awakening. Tim meets someone.
He was already there, sitting at the bar, and so I sat down, and he turned around at one point and saw me and kind of did a double take, and I just said, hello.
Her name was Kim, a woman as calm as Doreen had been troubled. It was a fateful meeting in a bar that would end up changing this family forever. Tim was instantly smitten.
I swear he's like a teenager. It was so wonderful to see him so happy because he'd gone through a lot. And I was just so happy that he'd found someone.
He was basically going to cut me out of his life completely. I knew he had already chosen his girlfriend over me, and it hurt really bad because this is the man that I thought loved me and was my dad.
It wasn't just me. She didn't want anybody in the picture. I think it was about that she just didn't want anybody else in Tim's life that she would view as competition.
Do you think she was genuinely threatened by you?
Yes.
Tim was starting to think about retirement and moving in with his new girlfriend. He asked Bray, now about to turn 18 and in college, to leave the nest. There was a confrontation.
There was a big fight between Tim and Bray. Do you have any idea what that was about?
He was just so incredibly frustrated with her behavior and her choices.
Kim says a jealous Bray began rebelling and pushing against rules. But Tim was tolerant until a fender bender finally pushed him over the edge.
He was contacted by an insurance company that she had done a hit-and-run accident.
We had got into an argument, and he basically had said that I wasn't his daughter, that I was worthless, and he didn't know why he had ever let someone like me think that she could be his daughter, that I wasn't good enough.
For any teenage girl, those were crushing words. But for a girl who had endured years of rejection from her mother, catastrophe. And so the phone call that Bray says began everything.
You have these feelings that you want to kill Tim or you want Tim to be dead. You call Nathaniel. What do you say to him?
I basically asked him to calm me down, you know, tell him, I told him, you know, these things are going through my head, please, you know, make them go away, you know.
And instead, what did he say?
Instead, he said, well, you know, what if you weren't there anymore? And I was like, well, you know, that would be kind of cool.
Why didn't you say, no, Nathan, I'm just having crazy thoughts?
I was very hurt. I was very angry. I wanted him to hurt like he had hurt me.
So you devised a scheme to kill him?
I guess you could say that, yes.
A plot begun by Bray. But she says it all came from Nathan.
Whose idea was it to make a key and get cash?
Nathan's.
Whose idea was it to use a gun?
Nathan's.
Whose idea was it to stage it as a burglary?
Nathan's.
Take me through that day. What was the plan? Tim comes home?
Tim comes home, I tie him up, and Nathan leans him down in the laundry room and shoots him.
In the moments before when you're upstairs and you hear Tim coming in, what's going through your mind?
What the hell's going on? What's going to happen? I can't believe this is actually going to happen. Freaking out completely.
Why did you hold your dad's hands when you were downstairs?
I don't know.
Did you look into his eyes?
No.
At one point, your hands are free.
At one point, yes.
Yeah, couldn't you have done something to stop it?
For about 15 seconds? I mean, what was I going to do?
Well, push Nathan. Kick him.
It didn't even go through my head.
Bray said it all happened in seconds. Suddenly, Tim and Nathan struggling for the gun, followed by a shot.
The first gunshot goes off. What do you see?
At first, I think that, you know, my dad shot him and, you know, it was all going to be okay. And then I see blood coming out of my dad and him fall to the ground.
I mean, how quickly thereafter did the other 3 shots happen?
5 seconds.
Did you see them go into Tim? Bray, what was going through your mind as you're watching your father get executed?
Oh, my God.
Were you screaming?
Yeah.
What were Tim's final words?
You shot me. I can't believe you shot me. You killed me.
But Nathan's lawyer says if those were Tim's last words, Bray listened to them all by herself. He says the prosecution can't even prove Nathan was in California that day, let alone in the murder house.
Did you kill Tim McNeil?
No.
Did you threaten your sister? Did you tell her, if you don't go through with this, I'm going to kill you too?
The worst threat that I ever gave my sister was that if you don't take care of your chores, you're going to your room.
The prosecutor saved his harshest words for Bray.
This is a monstrous crime.
And finishes by reading from a letter Bray wrote in prison.
It was supposed to be one clean shot, easy shot to the head. No pain, no suffering. I was supposed to be upstairs. She never tried to withdraw from any conspiracy. It just got messy. Timothy McNeil did not deserve to end up like that. And the only reason that he ended up like that is because of her and because of her brother. And those tears and that expression is too late.
But the defense lawyers, speaking to their separate juries, do a brilliant job of finger-pointing.
Bray Hansen is right-handed. Nathaniel Gann is left-handed. And that gun was resting in what would be a natural right-handed orientation for him.
She's forced to stand in this game room with her hands zip-tied behind her back while her brother proceeds to shoot her dad.
As the two juries are deliberating, a terrible fear preying on the police. Could his jury think she did it and her jury think he did it? Because the police know something critical, the final twist. Another confession tape the jury never got to hear.
I wanted him to honestly feel like, take me seriously for sure.
After the murder of Tim McNeil, the trial of his stepchildren, Bray and Nathan, is drawing to a close. Once again, Mary Fulginiti.
Two separate juries deliberating the fate of this sister and brother charged with the murder of their stepfather.
Do not discuss your deliberations with anyone.
Will they reach the same verdict, or will one be convicted while the other goes free?
I think
now all the attorneys can do is wait.
How long has the jury been out?
They went out yesterday at about 1:40.
Who knows what they're talking about in there? And I've given up speculating what jurors think about years ago, because it just drives you crazy. At this point, it's completely out of my hands.
Bray admits to planning the killing, but says she backed out. Nathan's defense is simpler. He says he's innocent and wasn't even in California when the crime occurred.
Nathaniel, why did you do it?
I didn't do it.
Did you hate him that much?
I loved Tim. I had more to gain by Tim being alive than being dead.
While Nathan says he and Tim loved each other, the facts paint a more complicated picture. No photos of them together. No sign of Nathan in Tim's will. And while Tim did try to take his side against Doreen, he didn't stop her physical abuse.
Your sister said that she put this plan in motion, but you're the one that came up with the details. Why would she blame you? Why would she implicate you if you had absolutely nothing to do with it?
Well, my sister blames me for everything, and she always has. That's the older brother, younger sister complex.
Nathan says it was Bray alone who killed Tim.
Are you haunted by his pleas? Are you haunted by his final words to you, pleading for his life?
I wouldn't know.
He said, Nathan, why are you doing this?
If he did, then there must have been someone else named Nathan there.
He sounds pretty convincing, but there's one more twist to this story. A big one.
Did you kill Tim McNeil?
No.
Then why did you tell the cops you did?
All right.
In this videotaped interrogation, which took place in Arizona the day after the killing,
What's going on is you're under arrest. And for what? Murder.
Nathan at first professes shocked innocence.
What do you mean?
But the police keep pressing him.
The bottom line is you're right. Tim is dead. Your mother's dead. Your sister's in jail. And you're sitting in here under arrest for murder.
And Nathan goes from emotional to confessional.
Struggle. Struggle. Sometimes you get so scared. And after the mistakes I made, it was just too much adrenaline. And it makes it so flash, so quick, and hard to really think about it. Would you mind if I did a quick demonstration?
He even volunteers to reenact the killing.
Absolutely. Use me. You know what I did? Stand up, take that way, your hands behind your back. Have my hands down. Kind of like go like there. Struggle. You try to get away. You try to jerk away or lunge or something. Try to take the gun.
Well, Nathan, either you say yes or no if somebody asks you if you shot the fatal shot.
Why
did you say yes?
I don't recall. I don't think I said yes.
Did you feel like you had to shoot him? Yeah. Well, after he was dying, put him out of his misery, I mean, what's the point? You stood over his head and shot him in the head, right? What's the point of that? So then sit there and bleed to death.
It was a clear confession of murder, all the more convincing given the rawness of his emotions.
How did you feel, Nathan, when you went down?
And details that finally seemed to bring clarity as to why he aimed a gun at the man who helped raise him.
Did you look scared? I wondered that. I mean, you knew it was you. You laughed. You laughed.
In the end, police say it all came down to the one thing a son yearns for from his father: respect.
I remember Nathan saying that McNeil still didn't respect me.
I wanted him to honestly feel like, take me seriously for change. I just me.
But neither jury, deliberating separately somewhere inside this building, knows anything about this confession. Because of a legal technicality, it was not introduced into evidence. Will the jury make the right decision? Will they decide it was the stepdaughter jealous of the new woman in her dad's life? Or the stepson, disrespected by his dad for the last time?
Hello?
For the police, waiting for Nathan's verdict is nerve-wracking. 2 days go by, no word.
Day 3.
Day 3.
What are you guys thinking?
Second guessing what the jury's doing. And
All right.
Finally, on the third day, which sibling would pay for this crime?
It's my understanding you have made decisions in this case.
When we come back.
Madam Clerk, please read the verdicts.
Bray Hansen and her brother Nathan Gann are on trial for murdering their stepfather. Now, jurors will decide their fate. They've seen a lot of evidence, but one thing they didn't see is Nathan's videotaped confession. Will that affect the verdict? Now, with the conclusion of our story, Mary Fulginiti.
The moment of truth.
And you have indicated that you have made decisions in this case. Is that correct, sir? Do you have the verdict forms? Please hand them to my bailiff.
Nathan's verdict is read first.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Nathaniel Marcus Gann, guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 107.
Nathan gets 25 years behind bars. His jury concludes he did not pull the trigger.
The said defendant did not intentionally and personally discharge a
I think the
firearm.
verdicts were fair here. Nathan, the triggerman, is not guilty of using a gun. When you know he's the one that pulled the trigger.
he's still guilty of first-degree murder.
That's the bottom line, is I'm satisfied with the verdict.
Bray's verdict is read the next day.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Bray F. Hansen, guilty of the crime of murder and fix the degree thereof as murder in the first degree.
Ironically, Bray is found guilty of a gun charge, as well as lying in wait, which brings an automatic sentence of life without parole. Jurors were unanimous.
I've cried every day, and yet it's the absolute right thing to do.
Do you consider yourself to be a murderer?
No.
Even though you talked about killing Tim McNeil.
There's a difference between doing it in fantasy and actually pulling the trigger.
I mean, I think the reason why the jury had difficulty was because you didn't stop it.
In my mind, at the time, I did. When you're not thinking clearly, when you're in shock, when you're afraid, when you're just in such a frenzied state, you don't see all those possibilities.
For the McNeils, closure.
It's not going to bring Tim back, but at least there's justice, and we're grateful for that.
If no diminishment of their anger.
Stupid. It wasn't a heart attack or a car accident. It was planned.
It wasn't even a crime of passion by two teenagers that made a mistake. It was cold, calculated execution.
But incredibly, Tim McNeil's daughter Erin feels only grief.
What would you like to say to
to Bray. I mean, I just wanted to, I mean, I haven't even hugged her. I mean, I just wanted to go and just tell her, I don't know. I'll miss you. I'm mourning the loss of you as much as I'm mourning the loss of my dad. I don't know. It's, I don't even know what to say to her. I mean, I think it'll take my whole life to probably wrap my mind around it.
In an unaddressed letter found in Bray's cell before the trial, she tries to explain herself. I know this will be hard for you to believe because you loved him so much, but so did I, and I still do.
The letter that you heard about at trial, her lawyer told us earlier today that that letter, he felt, was going to be sent to you as an apology, as a way of explaining what happened.
And that's why it's a tragedy.
Erin told me something that I think you might want to know. She saw you in court for the first time. Her reaction was that she wanted to hug you when she saw you at trial. And she says she still loves you. Does that surprise you?
It does.
And why? It's okay to cry.
No, it's not.
Why does it surprise you?
Because as much as he was my dad, he was her dad.
Anything you want to say to Erin?
That I'm sorry. If I could go back in time, I'd do it in less than a heartbeat. But I can't.
A brother and sister who say they grew up with everything but their mother's love, now grappling with the enormity of having taken their stepfather's life.